In today's story, we'll be exploring the life and very short death of Lawrence Cawthorne, a butcher from 17th century England. The question you probably have is this: what's so important about this man? It's this: Lawrence's death and burial is one of the first recorded and verified cases of a person being buried alive and the fact discovered. The next question is, did they get him out alive? Well, you have to wait until the end of the video to find out. But before we get into this, if you're a fan of dark stories and horrific histories, please hit the subscribe button and the notification button. That way you'll be told every time I post a new video, which is once a week. Also, when you get to the end of this story, if you find the urge to put a small bell on your grave so that you can ring it in case you wake up after you've been buried, then please do give this video a like. Let's get into it. In 17th century London stood Newgate Market. It was said that you could buy pretty much any kind of food you wanted from all around England. Fresh fish, meat, vegetables, and sometimes foods that came from abroad. Generally, the market stallholders were a friendly bunch. They got on even though they were competing. However, amongst all the stallholders, one man stood out: Lawrence Cawthorne, the butcher. Lawrence was a huge, powerful man with massive shoulders and an equally broad chest. It was said he went about his work with a cold look in his eyes and a sense of glee as he hacked away at the meat. But there was a more disturbing aspect to Lawrence's life. He was a moneylender, and it was said that people who failed to maintain their payments to him ended up on the wrong side of the chopping block, and that some of the meat that he sold wasn't quite what it appeared to be. Fearing for their lives, none of the other market stallholders mentioned this. They simply got on with their work. In 1667, everything changed. A cold, brutal winter settled upon London. Most of the residents refused to go outside unless they absolutely needed to. They preferred staying in their houses, stoking the fires and remaining warm. But the market stallholders came to work every day, including Lawrence. After one brutally cold day, Lawrence fell ill. He made his way back to his lodgings in the city and told his housekeeper to call a doctor. By the time the doctor had arrived, Lawrence had been afflicted by a horrendous fever. He was burning up inside. The doctor held little hope for him. He told the landlady, by tomorrow Lawrence will be dead. In most cases, people would be saddened by the death of another person, but the landlady was well aware of Lawrence's money-lending schemes, and she saw his death as an easy way to get hold of his cash. She couldn't wait for him to die. As it turns out, the doctor was correct. The next day, Lawrence was dead. Lawrence's funeral was a sad and pathetic affair. Only a few market stallholders and his landlady turned up. They all wanted to see him in the ground for very different reasons. The market stallholders feared him. They wanted him gone. His landlady was only interested in his cash. She wanted to ensure that he was buried before she took off with his money. Shortly after Lawrence's coffin was lowered into the ground, the small crowd dispersed. About 4 days after Lawrence's burial, a gravedigger was walking through the graveyard, heading towards a plot that he was due to dig out. As he walked, he heard a strange, muffled sound in the air. He paused and listened. Tobias, the gravedigger, knew that it was probably the wind playing tricks on his mind. He'd worked as a gravedigger for over 20 years, and these sounds were commonplace. He ignored them and moved on. On the 4th day, as Tobias walked through the graveyard, he once again heard the sounds. This time they were louder. He started to navigate his way through the graveyard, pausing here and there to listen. Finally he came to Lawrence's grave. The noises were much louder. Tobias knelt down and placed his ear to the ground, and what he heard terrified him. He could hear Lawrence's muffled screams coming up through the earth. Tobias ran from the graveyard and raced down the street, banging on the doors of the houses where other gravediggers lived. He called them out into the street and told them what he'd heard. Quickly the team assembled around Lawrence's grave and started digging. But the work was incredibly hard. A recent rain had packed down the soil. It took them 4 hours to reach Lawrence's coffin. Finally one of the shovels struck wood. Tobias called a halt to the digging. He jumped down into Lawrence's grave and used his shovel to prise open the lid of the coffin. What he saw inside horrified him. Lawrence was inside his coffin with a look of terror on his face, his skin pale. His nails had been ripped out. They were embedded in the wood of the coffin where he tried to claw his way out, and in the centre of his head was a huge gash. Lawrence had tried to headbutt his way out of his coffin. Too late. He really was dead this time. But what of his landlady? Nobody knows. She simply disappeared, as did all his wealth. As for the market stall holders, they once again breathed a sigh of relief. Lawrence was truly dead. The horrifying tale of Lawrence Cawthorne, one of the first people to be buried alive. If you've liked this story, please give it a like. Also, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week for a new story. Until then, see ya.